Welcome. If you've ever really wanted to describe people and places in Spanish and just sound right, then you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to crack the code on some grammar essentials that'll make a huge, huge difference in how natural you sound.
So let's start with a simple question. How do you really introduce someone in Spanish? It sounds basic, right? But nailing the details is what separates a beginner from someone who sounds like they actually know the language. This is your starting point for building real sentences. Okay, let's dive right in.
So how are we going to do this? Well, our guide is actually a short paragraph from a Spanish textbook. It introduces us to a girl named Laura. By just breaking down how she's described, sentence by sentence, we're going to uncover 3 absolutely essential tools for your grammar toolkit. First up, we've got to talk about identity. How do you say someone is something? In Spanish, this is a much bigger question than it seems. And the first, most fundamental answer is the verb ser. So the very first thing we learn about Laura is this: Laura es de Perú. This tells us something fundamental, something permanent about her origin. And the key word here, really the engine of the whole sentence, is that little word es. That little word es comes from the verb ser. And as you can see here, ser is kind of like a chameleon. It changes its form depending on who you're talking about. So for I, it's soy. For you, it's eres. And for a he or she, like our friend Laura, it's es. Now, don't worry about memorizing this whole chart right now. Just recognizing that these different words all mean the same basic thing is a massive step forward. So here's the bottom line. When do you actually use ser? Well, think of it for things that are part of a person's core identity. It's for who they are, like Laura es mi amiga. It's for where they're from, ella es de Perú. Or for defining personality trait, like Laura es cortés, she is polite. If it defines the very essence of a person or a thing, you're probably going to use ser. Okay, so a verb like ser is super powerful, but it can't really work all by itself. To make our sentences richer and more detailed, we need connector words. In grammar, we call them prepositions, but you can just think of them as the mortar between the bricks of a sentence.
And hey, we've actually already seen our first one, de. It often translates to from or of, and it's just perfect for showing origin, connecting a person directly back to a place. Next up is in. This one's pretty straightforward. It just means in or at. It puts someone or something inside a location. So the text tells us Laura lives in Cuba. She is from Peru, but she lives in Cuba. You see that distinction? It's super important. And finally, for this round, we have con, which simply means with. This is how we connect people to other people. So Laura lives con su madre, with her mother. So there you have it. They, en, and con. 3 little words that act as the glue holding your sentences together. All right, so we've covered the core rules. But now for the really fun part. Every single language has its own quirks. Phrases that just don't translate word for word. And learning these is the absolute secret to sounding less like a textbook and way more like a native speaker. So based on everything we just learned about ser being used for identity, it seems perfectly logical, right? You'd say, Laura es un años. It makes total sense, but is it actually correct? And the answer is nope, not at all. And listen, this is one of the most common and totally understandable mistakes that English speakers make. The logic is totally sound, but the language just has a different way of thinking about it. And this right here perfectly illustrates a huge difference between the languages. Here's the deal. In Spanish, you don't are your age. You have your age. You use the verb tener, which means to have. So the right way to say it is Laura tiene 11 años. Literally, Laura has 11 years. This is a huge one. If you remember anything, remember this. Now, this different way of thinking shows up in other places too. We just learned to use tener for age, but check this out. For moods, like being in a good or bad mood, you use another verb, estar, not ser. And this is so cool because it actually reinforces our very first lesson. Why? Because a mood is a temporary state, not a permanent personality trait. The textbook says Laura nunca está de mal humor. She is never in a bad mood. It's a state she's in, not who she is. Okay, I know that was a lot of information, but you've just picked up 3 absolutely essential tools for describing pretty much anything in Spanish. So let's do a quick recap and see how it all fits together. This right here is your foundation. First, you use ser for permanent identity, who someone is, where they're from. Second, you use those little prepositions, de, en, and con, to add the details and connect the dots. And third, you remember those special phrases, those quirks, like using tin air for age. With just these 3 tools, you can now build a surprisingly complete profile of a person.
So getting these basics down is the first and honestly the most important step on your Spanish journey. You've now learned the grammar of being. But what about the grammar of doing? Of action. Well, that's the next exciting chapter to explore.